It's time for PaleoRadio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering PaleoRadio.
Welcome to PaleoRadio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Welcome to PaleoRadio, live in studio here at WPRR, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM, and in affiliation with Secular Media Group. My name is Joe Elder, and I am joined again with two fantastic human beings, Ed Brayton and Justin Schieber. I will give you guys your wonderful intros now. Justin Schieber is a former co-host of Reasonable Doubt's radio show and podcast and current host of Real Atheology, the YouTube channel where he produces informational videos on contemporary academic philosophy of religion. Justin enjoys promoting a friendly yet firm skepticism towards religious claims. He frequently lectures at philosophical arguments for and against the existence of God and has participated in many public debates throughout the United States and Canada. He is currently working on a book about the existence of God with Canadian theologian Randall Rouser and the Prometheus books that's due out later this year. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you.
And again, we have Ed Brayton, who's a former stand-up comedian and previous host of Culture Wars, which aired here on WPRR. He's the current writer at Patheos.com and a board member of Center of Inquiry Grand Rapids. Ed has been part of many political religious debates nationally and is continuing his activism here as a secular humanist in Grand Rapids. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Have you noticed that it takes two of us to replace Jeremiah?
Yeah, and we can speak on that right now. And as people know, we've been off for 2 weeks. There's a lot of information that we can catch up on, but we'll be brief. Samantha Bannister passed away a couple weeks ago. Jeremiah is still working with that. He still is working outside of the studio here. He's been doing a lot of things, but obviously taking some time. So if you want more information on that, please go to his Facebook page, Jeremiah Bannister, or you can go to teamtinydancer.com for updates. But yeah, we do have our thoughts out with him. First segment we'll get right into is the Republican National Convention, fellas, and how wonderful that was.
Oh, boy.
Does anybody ever call you Elder Joe?
I have been called Elder Joe before.
Right. Okay.
But how many barns have you raised? That's
I have not individually raised any. I remember being at one when I was a young child, though, for real. If you can believe that or not.
You've been at a barn before?
No, at a barn raising, an actual barn raising.
That'd actually be pretty cool, I think.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah, pretty impressive.
I've seen The Witness.
Separate story. But speaking of beliefs that are back in earlier centuries, the Republican National Convention did take place a little while ago. I have a clip of Steve King. We can jump right into this. This is just out and out Steve King deciding he's going to skip over being subtle and just flat out ask why not support white people being better than everybody else. So let's go play that
I'd
clip.
ask you to go back through history and figure out where are these contributions that have been made by these other categories of people that you're talking about. Where did any other subgroup of people contribute more to civilization?
Than white people?
Than Western civilization itself, that's rooted in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and the United States of America, and every place where the footprint of Christianity settled the world. That's all of Western civilization.
I want to sit here and make you in favor.
So Western Europe, Eastern Europe. I wonder what subgroup he's talking about.
Yeah, it's the biggest subgroup ever, apparently. So what do we think about that?
I think they've exchanged dog whistles for megaphones at this point. Like, they haven't taken the mask off, they've put the hood on.
That's so true.
Which is why, I think you're seeing, like, massive white supremacists. And let me say this. Whenever I see a news outlet call someone like David Duke a white nationalist, I get really like, no, that's the term they invented so they wouldn't sound like white supremacists.
That's a cover term.
They're white supremacists say so.
Absolutely.
But he's getting massive support. Practically every KKK chapter in the country has endorsed him. White supremacists up and down have supported Donald Trump. And at the very least, he has provided them safe harbor with his nativist rhetoric, and they feel like this is their day. They've said this outright on their shows.
Sure, and I think he packages it. He has a little bit of a modern way of packaging it, but he has the very old school style, which I actually think is kind of Nixon-esque about we've got law and order. We will provide the safety, and that's what we want, right? Let's get back to that, right? And, he kind of has that whole development, but then he also will call against what they're doing the PC culture thing, right? We can't be so politically correct, which is basically code for this is why we need to bring these nationalistic arguments back into the mainstream argument.
I just want to be able to use the N-word again.
Remember back in the day when we could tell racist jokes in the workplace and people didn't get all frazzled about it? That's exactly what I hear when I hear that.
Even the nostalgia was better in the old days.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. There's also another clip of Steve King. Now, this one is interesting because I think it slipped under because it's kind of hard to hear, but I caught it and I replayed it. If we can play this, he actually brings in Christianity, but then he also talks about why it's atheism's fault. So it's an interesting thing that he said right at the end of what Chris Hayes said in rebuttal.
Let me know for the record that if you're looking at the ledger of Western civilization, for every flourishing democracy, you have you got Hitler and Stalin as well. So there's a lot on both sides.
On Christianity.
Okay, Congressman Steve King, April Ryan,
atheism and agnosticism.
So it's kind of hard to hear, but he says blame that on atheism and agnosticism. When Hayes brings up, oh yes, you've got what's happened in the Holocaust, you have these other issues. Oh no, well that's of course people who left Christianity they're white people, but they're not white Christians.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, so no true Scotsman.
But Chris Hayes brings up an interesting point. It's a question that I've asked a lot of people when they've started talking about this sort of thing. When people start talking about Western culture or European culture, I say, you know what? Adolf Hitler and Anne Frank were both Western Europeans. Mm-hmm. Which one of them represents? Yes. Which one of them is the true representative of Western culture?
Right. Yeah. Well, or just the idea of Edward Longshanks, Robert the Bruce. Those are both European cultures, two and one. Vastly different between the ideas of Scotland and the ideas of Britain or all those, but bulked into one generous group when we're talking about building a cultural civilization. So
Wallace, that's the blue guy, right?
Yeah, that's old blue guy.
That screamed a lot.
Yep, that would be him. He's Mel Gibson with long hair, if we all remember correctly.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Oh, we're talking about Scottish Revolution against the English in the 1200s. I'm bringing in the real modern stuff.
Mel Gibson made a movie about this in which he painted himself blue.
Yes, I know.
And screamed a lot, mostly at Jewish people.
The only movie where, the only movie where the Jews weren't the main enemy.
I remember that one.
Exactly right. So the next clip I have, which is amazing from the RNC, is Rudy Giuliani getting all amped up on whatever he was taking. So we can play that clip.
It's time to make America safe again. It's time to make America one again. One America! What happened? What happened to? There's no black America. There's no white America. There is just America! What happened to it?
Okay, kids.
Go ahead.
Don't do math, first of all.
His teeth weren't looking great.
You guys skipped out at the end of that when he told all those damn hippies to get off his lawn.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm going to pop your balloons the next time they get near me. I think that is a perfect example of, number one, he's an old man who he's not very relevant anymore.
But he's really trying to be
as
hard as he damn well can.
Exactly right.
It reminded me of 1992 when Pat Buchanan gave his now very famous, very angry speech at the Republican National Convention. And Dennis Miller, back when he was actually funny, said...
Early 90s, right?
Yeah, said at his show the next day that he said, I'm sure that speech was much more compelling in the original German.
Oh, man. And I think, too, when I hear these things, all I can hear about is... It's always, like we've talked about just briefly, but the call to the nostalgic past. Back in the day, I can't really tell you when, but there's back in a time when things were all just right. And I can hear somebody saying this exact thing during the civil rights movement. What happened to no black America, no white America, just America? Mm-hmm. And that's someone who's saying, guys, wasn't the status quo better when we just all kind of kept quiet about things that we knew were wrong?
Right. When those black people couldn't drink out of our water fountains.
Yeah. And I know they're mad about it, but why don't we just go back to it? Because I just don't like all the arguing. Like, that's kind of how people have reacted.
There was actually an interview that one of the networks did with a delegate on the RNC floor during the convention where he asked him about this idea of taking America back. And he said, exactly when was America great that you want to take it back to? And he said, well, the Reagan administration. Violent crime was double what it is now during the Reagan administration. I mean, everything about violent crime at that thing and all the demagoguery that went on about that is just a big lie. Crime has been dropping since 1991, pretty much steadily.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but people feel like it's how we were talking about this before we started, about how people feel.
Right.
Because when they had the strong men, they felt like they were safer, even though statistically it was abhorrent.
This is largely what Newt Gingrich was saying in the interview.
Right.
Too bad you don't have a clip of that. I
should have got it.
He was being interviewed by. Do you remember who this was?
One of the MSNBC hosts, but I don't remember which one.
Yeah, and they're asking him about this, about like the perceptions of crime, and it was such a bizarre interview. He essentially got to the point where saying like the perception is good enough, facts don't matter, and perception it's a perfectly valid thing to appeal to get votes.
Sure. But she didn't ask him the obvious question, which is, gee, Newt, do you think maybe you have some responsibility for that?
Yeah, exactly.
Given that you've just spent 4 days scaring people into thinking that crime has gone up when it actually hasn't.
It's like, no, we're not peddling those feelings. We're just guiding those feelings into what is a more logical response for themselves. Like he's just, I'm a shepherd of the feelings of ill will.
We're exploiting that. You are manipulating people and you are demagoguing this issue to such a. I mean, look, demagoguery is a pretty stable currency in politics. But I've never seen it like this before. I mean, this is taking it to such a massive level. And did you see that on Thursday morning, the Trump campaign actually put in a statement accusing the Democrats of trying to use fear to score political points, right? And I'm just,
That's blowing my mind.
And another irony meter goes down in flames,
And I can't remember his name. I know I saw on your social media you were talking about him. I don't agree with many of his views. He's the creator of Dilbert.
Scott Adams.
Scott Adams. Yeah. Now, but he was talking about hypnotherapy, which was an interesting thing. But he was talking about how just Donald Trump as a political candidate. Now I know he supports him, which I can't understand.
Oh no, he's endorsed Hillary.
He's endorsed Hillary now.
Scott Adams endorsed Hillary a few weeks ago because he said that if I don't, they're going to kill me. Scott Adams' connection to reality is tenuous at very
That's
best.
right. So this is one of those things where you can say a blind squirrel finds a nut. You know what I mean? Like it can happen, but we can't count the source. But he was talking about Donald Trump's campaign and how he doesn't lay out anything in a factual way, and he doesn't lay out the specifics of plans. So he gives you a general idea, and you'll fill the gaps. The same way people see faces on Mars when it's just sand dunes, right? Yeah. We're making the creation with the generalizations, and I think that's a true claim about what Trump is doing to the media in general. He's just kind of playing them on the same game.
But here's my question. Was Scott Adams wearing a V-neck sweater at the time?
He absolutely was.
Really? Because he actually wrote a thing a few weeks ago claiming that the fact that women give V-neck sweaters to men as gifts is their attempt to emasculate them.
Wow.
He also wrote after Hillary Clinton's speech that entire convention he's the most easily emasculated human being on the planet.
So let me double down.
Emasculate myself. I'm emasculated right now.
I was going to say, let me again double down on saying that he's not the best source that you could possibly use.
No, but what you cited from him is correct. I think that is exactly what they're doing. Yeah. Not intentionally. I don't think Trump is smart enough to do that intentionally.
Oh no. He's throwing stuff against the wall. But when you have a guy who is surrounded by people who are nothing but yes men to you, your dumbest of ideas get that whole nod in the room, like, oh yeah, best thing I've ever heard, and you actually start to believe that what you say is better than what other people are saying.
The thing about Trump is he can say even the most inane things with this overwhelming confidence. Not that he actually is confident about it, but he's learned how to posture the way macho men usually do.
Very dismissive, and he's as dismissive of others as he is confident of himself, and it's just it's a nice little.
But I think he's dismissive of others because he doesn't have actual confidence in himself.
Absolutely,
he has that confidence that comes with fake machismo.
Sure,
which is what matters in elections.
And yes, and maybe this is being too sympathetic from him, but when you when you grow up in a situation like a man like Donald Trump does, I think it's pretty hard to tell what are real feelings about you and not. And how can you even get a gauge of what you are when you don't get a true gauge from other people? How many people come up to him and say, Donald, I think you're a complete a-hole or whatever? Right. Maybe more people now than ever. But at the time, there's much more people that act like he's somebody who's influential and creative and can do things that other people can't, and he gets this idea.
You're right about being surrounded by yes men. He hears nothing but, wow, that's amazing, Donald. That's great, Donald. They kiss his posterior.
Sure.
Because he's a billionaire.
Absolutely, yeah. There's games to be played there.
Sure.
I only have one more clip to play. We'll have to skip over the Ted Cruz one. But this is Donald Trump talking about being the law and order candidate, which when we were talking about him going back and being a little bit like Nixon, I thought this was almost exactly like Nixon's speech.
In this race for the White House, I am the law and order candidate. The irresponsible rhetoric of our president, who has used the pulpit of the presidency to divide us by race and color, has made America a more dangerous environment than, frankly, I have ever seen and anybody in this room has ever watched or seen. This administration has failed America's inner cities. Remember, it has failed America's inner cities.
So he does a little bit of dog whistle there, but not much at the end. Mostly it is him just saying it's the scariest time it could possibly be in America.
Yeah, I spent the 3 days after that convention digging a bomb shelter in my backyard. I was so terrified. I mean, I thought we were going to see like a cross between Independence Day and Purge. Like everyone is just gunning to kill me personally.
Yeah, well, and that's the central focus of it, isn't it? Justin, what do you think with like Trump Pence America? What would that look like? If imagine him getting it, what do you think that would entail?
What he would want it to?
What he would want it to be.
Eesh.
Or maybe even really realistically what it would be.
It would eventually turn into a dictatorship. That's how Trump, I think, wants it to be. Like the way he speaks about his policies makes it when it talks about I'm the only one that can fix this. Right? There's a clear suggestion there that what he would really like is if things would just turn into a dictatorship and he could do what he wants. Pence, I don't even know that he really serves much of a purpose other than to fulfill the wet dreams of the conservatives. And that's the role he's there to play.
Yeah.
So it's not a pretty picture.
Yeah. Pence also has Coke money. Maybe not this election, but he's connected with that group.
Yeah, he's pretty well connected to the Cooks, but the Cooks hate Donald Trump. So, I would answer that question by saying I don't have a foggiest idea. I don't think anybody does, because Donald Trump does not think coherently. And I think what Hillary Clinton said the other night about anybody you can bait with a tweet is not somebody you want with a nuclear code.
That was a great line.
Bam.
I think that's really a pretty profound statement, because in Trump we have a guy who is, I love that somebody, I don't remember who, somebody referred to him as Trumple thin skin, which I think is an amazing,
that's wonderful.
Wish I had thought of that.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Because he is like the thinnest skinned human being ever. And like, I think this whole campaign, I think for the next 3 months, you're going to see the Clinton campaign, and probably the person that will do this mostly will be Elizabeth Warren on her behalf, just pushing the buttons.
She's inherited the bulldog role, and
yeah.
She fits it well.
I think she does.
She does it well, but I think they're so aware of how reactionary Trump is that I bet they have this planned out as to this is what we're going to say on this day, and 2 days later we're going to say this. Because, look what happened. She said that during her speech, and what did it do? It caused like a 57-tweet Twitter storm by Trump. He's so predictable in this regard. He's so reactionary. He's the typical playground bully who cannot stand to be challenged.
Absolutely.
I can't tell whether I'm just terribly excited to watch the debates or whether I'm horrified. Because, as you said, I think they're very aware of how thin-skinned he is and how he loses control when he's being attacked. And I think of course they're going to use that in their strategy.
They should.
Of course they're going to. And it's going to – we might get a glimpse at a complete meltdown. If my hopes are a bit too high.
I think you could be very
That
low
is must-see TV.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
I'll be glued to the TV on those
You want to talk about ratings. You can get ratings by seeing a guy completely melt down. But if he tries to turn the corner and play the same game with Hillary Clinton will kill him in debate. That woman can play ball up there, right? You guys are listening to Paleo Radio. We're going to be back in a couple minutes. Stick around. We're going to hit up the DNC next.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Welcome back to 95.3 FM, 1680 AM Public Reality Radio. Joe Elder, Ed Brayton, and Justin Schieber. We're going to be talking about the DNC, the Democratic National Convention that took place. Lots and lots of fun.
Hold on. Before you get any further, just want to remind everybody we are live today in the studio. If you want to call in, 616-656-1680 is the number to call right now. Do so.
Thank you so much for the reminder, Darren. We have another clip here, too. This is a great one about Michelle Obama kind of addressing the Make America Great Again rhetoric that we've been hearing so much on the right. And she kind of gives her 2 cents about it. We can run that clip.
And because of Hillary Clinton, my daughters and all our sons and daughters now take for granted that a woman can be president of the United States. Don't let anyone ever tell you that this country isn't great, that somehow we need to make it great again, because this right now is the greatest country on earth.
And I think that speaks to what everybody has been saying about the Make America Great Again. I think people get caught in 2 arguments. If you say, when was America great? Well, yeah, we're right. We're not saying that for all time America has been awful, but we're not saying it's been the greatest thing ever. But the addendum to that is that we also think that it has the potential to be something great. Right now it's the best potential it could be. I think Michelle Obama kind of touched on that. Kind of airy-fairy, right?
Whenever I hear this, America is the greatest country in the blah, 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 the history of the world, blah, 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 my eyes glaze over. It's just, I don't care which party does it, stop it. It's just stupid. This ridiculous nationalistic fervor that we have to not to be great, but to declare ourselves great. Mm-hmm. It's the difference between, and this irritates me about the Democrats, that they are now borrowing this rhetoric. I understand politically why they do it, but it still bugs the crap out of me.
They're swapping nationalism a little bit.
Right. I mean, I wrote this thing a long time ago about the difference between left-wing patriotism and right-wing patriotism. Right-wing patriotism is my country, right or wrong. Don't you ever dare say anything bad. And left-wing patriotism says, I want my country to be great by living up to the ideals it professes. Mm-hmm. I'll be a left-wing patriot all day long. I got no use for right-wing patriotism.
That's right.
And to see the Democrats adopting right-wing patriotic rhetoric irritates me. Although, again, I understand why they have to do it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's the fact that they have to do it that bugs me, that Americans are that shallow and childish about their own country.
Do you think it's funny that when one party moves one way or the other one seems to still be right shoulder to shoulder with them? They just take the rhetoric one step over. For instance, Republicans went harder for nationalism than they ever have. So now Democrats take a step to the right, and they've kind of plugged the hole that, like you just said, the Republicans have just left, where now they're the ones saying, but we are really, really great. You know, it seems like they didn't stay in their lane. They've moved over to match the push.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm seeing it differently. I'm seeing the Republicans. Well, at least I'm thinking of the polar opposites of the general, the overall quality of the country. They're going far to it's hell on earth, and we're going to this is heaven. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Seems to me like they're, at least in one respect, they're moving in opposite directions.
Yeah.
But they're sort of flipping positions in a sense. I mean, a lot of commentators noticed that I think one of the speakers, maybe it was President Obama, actually used the phrase "morning in America," which is Ronald Reagan's famous phrase. Ronald Reagan was relentlessly optimistic. And, historians say that's a big reason why he was so popular, was that he had such this optimistic, happy version of America. And now you're seeing the Democrats try to sort of seize that ground because the Republicans gave it up.
That's right.
And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, in the same sense, they saw that gap and they plugged the hole instead of leaving it, And it's just, it shows how willing people are to play the game. And that's why when they talk about how good parties are now, obviously the parties are not the same. There is one party that on a moral level is much better than the other one. On ways of how they handle things in-house, a lot of it is still about controlling power. We can't expect those people to be not human, right?
See, I've been told by all my Facebook friends that Hillary's a Republican, so I guess I'm confused by what you're saying here.
And that's the whole different ball of wax with the DNC. I have another clip from Obama. We'll get into that, but then we definitely have to talk about the Bernie Sanders effect of what happened at the DNC as well.
Look, we Democrats have always had plenty of differences with the Republican Party, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's precisely this contest of idea that pushes our country forward. But what we heard in Cleveland last week wasn't particularly Republican, and it sure wasn't conservative. What we heard was a deeply pessimistic vision of a country where we turn against each other and turn away from the rest of the world. And that is not the America I know. The America I know is full of courage and optimism and ingenuity. The America I know is decent and generous. And most of all, I see Americans of every party, every background, every faith, who believe that we are stronger together. Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, young, old, gay, straight, men, women, folks with disabilities, all pledging allegiance under the same proud flag to this big, bold country that we love. That's what I see. That's the America I know.
So again, obviously rah-rah, but I do like the sentiment, not to the extent that Obama took it, but the sentiment of saying, there is something to saying that we have an advancement here, but looking at us as separate divisions that are apart isn't the best way of doing it. Now, do I think that the Democrats are the greatest group ever at pulling everyone together? No. But I do like the ideas of what they're saying to retort back to the Make America Great Again claim.
Mm-hmm. Obama's clearly trying to reach some of the disaffected Republicans, it seems to me, when he's talking about this Trump fellow that you've somehow nominated. He's not
not
a
one
conservative.
Right.
He's not one of you. He's very different from you. And then he starts using this rhetoric like, we disagree on some fundamental things, but there's virtue to be found in that. And so he's, I think, really trying to get people to, recognize that, or at least assert that we've got a rather large tent and that you're invited under if you want.
Sure.
I thought a lot of the rhetoric, not just Obama, but I think they very clearly planned the speeches at the convention to aim directly at Republicans who don't want to vote for Trump. And there's a lot of those out there.
Certainly.
Now, a lot of those people are the really hardcore Christian right that aren't likely to come and vote for the Democrats.
Right.
But a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are people who maybe would ordinarily vote Republican, but they just find Trump to be so crass and classless and confused that they're like, is this really the best we can do? And so I think they were clearly aiming for those people. And to tie into the Bernie Sanders thing, the strategy there was perhaps to try to balance the scales from some of the left-wing Bernie supporters that they're going to lose.
Right.
That was going to be my next question.
And so when I've talked to people about this who say, how can Clinton win if she loses all these Bernie supporters? I say, but Donald Trump has the same problem. Mm-hmm. That I think those at least balance off. And my suspicion is that it's a bigger problem for Trump than it is for Clinton in terms of how many votes they're going to lose. And I think the Clinton campaign very clearly signaled what their internal polling was showing by picking Tim Kaine.
Yeah.
If they thought they really had a problem with Bernie supporters, they would have gone with a more progressive candidate than Tim Kaine. The fact that they didn't tells me that their internal polling, which, by the way, is typically more accurate than what you're seeing from public polling companies, because they have to get it right. They make decisions to shift millions and millions of dollars from one state to another and so forth, and decisions on campaign strategy. So they really put the money into making sure they're getting that stuff right.
So it's interesting. I mean, that's the way – I mean, we're talking about the way the Democratic Convention ended, but it began on a quite progressive note. I mean, we had Sanders, we had Warren speaking that first night.
Yep.
And so I think each night was kind of dedicated to a new demographic.
Yes.
The last night was clearly reaching toward the middle. Obviously, the Kaine decision was a reach toward the middle. They're quite clearly spreading their wings as wide as they can.
Day one was let's get back as many of the Bernie people as we can.
Yep.
You're right.
Day 3 and 4 was let's reach out to those family values Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you can say too that this has to do with, and maybe I'm being stereotypical to the Bernie Sanders group, a lot of them, but being naive about how the process works is a great way to give someone just a platform day and make them feel like something's really being pushed. And I'm not trying to be the absolute cynic, but I think honestly, George Carlin says, if you scratch a cynic, you get a disappointed idealist. I think you find that in the Sanders group, where a lot of people that are new to politics need to go through. I loved this candidate like no other, and he got screwed over this way, that way, and honestly. Does it happen? Yes. Is it a reality of how it happens? Yes.
Yeah,
and what do you do, right? And so I think that it's a way of playing to that group on day one, but it's a great point, Justin, that they applied it to a different group almost every day. You could see it.
And the disparity between what Ted Cruz did and what Bernie Sanders did is immense. Ted Cruz's flat-out refusal to endorse Donald Trump at the Republican convention.
That was such and
getting booed
to watch.
Yeah,
as Donald Trump enters from the rear of the.
We still have the clip, so we may play it later on too. But yes, we have a clip of him with Trump, or I like with Cruz, where he says to vote your conscience, and the crowd just boos.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you get booed for not having party affiliation.
Although let's also recognize that Ted Cruz didn't say that sincerely.
Oh no,
that was just the first speech of his 2020 campaign.
He was looking all shined up.
But contrast that with Bernie. Absolutely full-throated endorsement of Hillary Clinton.
That was awesome.
Told his followers to vote for her, told them to donate to her, to work on her campaign. I mean, immense difference. It started out with a small group of Bernie supporters, probably 200, 250 of them total, mostly from the California delegation in particular, just really angry and trying to disrupt things early on the Monday. And then after that, they got pretty quiet.
Yep.
And so I think, a lot of the commentators talked about sort of giving them a release valve on Monday, letting them blow a little steam off.
Okay.
And then they mostly calmed down. I mean, not entirely. Some of them still did the big dramatic walkout on Hillary's speech, which, what do you think you're achieving?
I compared it closely to Ron Paul and them leaving the RNC, what was in 2012, the same way the delegates were upset and they staged their walkout, had their separate convention, and later on it kind of just all turns into one thing. Mm-hmm. I've got one more clip of Obama. This is him talking about Trump selling fear.
America is already great. America is already strong. And I promise you, our strength, our greatness, does not depend on Donald Trump. In fact, it doesn't depend on any one person. And that, in the end, may be the biggest difference in this election. The meaning of our democracy. Ronald Reagan called America a shining city on a hill. Donald Trump calls it a divided crime scene that only he can fix. It doesn't matter to him that illegal immigration and the crime rate are as low as they've been in decades, because he's not actually offering any real solutions to those issues. He's just offering slogans, and he's offering fear. He's betting that if he scares enough people, he might score just enough votes to win this election.
And that's the overall argument that Donald Trump is playing for, is can you scare people into feeling like they're so disenfranchised that they need to do something drastic enough to put him into office to fix everything for them. Up next, general banter about the DNC, RNC, and just how we feel about politics in general in 2016. Stick around.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
Welcome back to PaleoRadio live in studio. Phone number here, 616-656-1680 to talk to Ed, Justin, and myself. Just chatting about the DNC and RNC and everything in between. Trump selling fear, which we know is basically what he's going on. It's a platform that has easily been sold to people before. But isn't it kind of interesting that people have bought on as high as they have with the crime rates going down and with immigration going out? I mean,
this doesn't really surprise me. If you ever read Richard Hofstadter, I don't know if you have. He wrote 2 essays back in the 60s. One was about anti-intellectualism and one was about the paranoid style in American politics. And what he pointed out, and he did a whole history of these right-wing nativist movements that cropped up every 30 or 40 years throughout our history. And he wrote this particularly about the John Birch Society, which was sort of the active nativist, anti-immigrant, group, right-wing paranoia group at the time. And he said, look, this isn't anything new. During times of economic stress, during times of fear of invasion, of attack, people become very scared and insecure, and they look for a strongman protector. In this age of terrorism, when you see all of these attacks going on, people are scared. And when they get scared, they circle the wagons around their tribe. This is all about psychological tribalism. Mm-hmm. And they want to shut out outsiders. And so Trump is not consciously, this isn't a strategy for him. Again, I don't think he's smart enough to do this. I just think this is natural for him, exploiting that fear with all of this nativist rhetoric, xenophobic rhetoric. We got to get immigrants out. We got to get the Muslims out. We face all the barbarians are at the door. Mm-hmm. And so that's a narrative that has played itself out over and over and over again in American history and in elsewhere, since the beginning of human civilization. So this is a very strong psychological tendency among human beings. And there is also a very strong psychological tendency among wannabe dictators to exploit that fear to gain power.
You also have the availability heuristic, where the things that get covered are the most, you get a lot of coverage of really violent crimes, of this scary world out there, all this terrorism. You get all these, the cop shootings, the different crimes and relating to Black Lives Matter and all these different movements, all these different tensions within the contemporary American life. And it's just that's what people focus on, and that's what scares people, and they think that it's about to happen to them any second.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's because it's just you turn on the TV and that's all you see.
Right. You're bombarded with images of this that stokes that fear even further.
Yeah. Never mind that statistically we're safer than we've ever been.
Yeah.
In a number of different measures.
It's funny how people get caught in between too, where on top of having the if it bleeds it leads mentality that we get fed with a lot, there's also just the informational towers that people keep themselves in, where the reason why we stay so divided too, and you kind of create those echo chambers, is somebody who's listening to Fox News and InfoWars is certainly not tuning into CNN and MSNBC as much. And conversely, it's the same exact, and I shouldn't have probably even included InfoWars in that, just, reading Breitbart, right? But there's not a cross-reference of reading ideas, and this is maybe something that's a little bit out of left field, but we have, as volatile of a conversation as it was, when you had people like Gore Vidal and William Buckley sit down and have to have a long-form conversation about things, that it did get a little tense. They did do ad hominems for sure, right?
And Buckley threatened to punch him.
Him, called him a...
I'm pretty sure he called him a gay slur.
He did call him a gay slur, like, at the end. And that, that's what they said was the creation of this idea that instead of what was originally going to be a good idea, and this is why I think it's a pivotal moment in our media, is that was seen as these are two people that are pillars of the opposite side coming to have a conversation. What it turned into was, can you believe how many people watched that whole segment of Buckley threatening to punch Vidal in the face?
We've got ratings.
And it changed the whole spectrum in a way where, and it's disappointing because William Buckley, as bad as he was with a lot of his ideals, I think, was good in the sense of we need to have people who are conservative that aren't considered moronic, that people actually listen to get conservative ideas
There's
into.
a respect for the intellect.
Yes, exactly.
And it was Buckley that drove the John Birch Society out of the conservative movement.
Yes, and he was very involved. And I know we're going back into that, but I just think that is important when we look at what we see today, and you see it's like, let's pair, a firing line or, Crossfire with Jon Stewart.
Yeah, I kind of grew up watching in the early 80s. Yeah, when Jon Stewart went on there, that's exactly the point he was making, the point you're just making, when he said, look, I'm on behalf of everybody, stop.
Yeah.
You're not
wrecking
helping.
This. And Bagala says, no, this is a debate show, right? He says, it's a debate. We're having debate. And Stewart said, I'd love if this was a debate show, but this is theater. And then he goes into talking about Tucker Carlson's bow ties.
Yeah, just kills him.
I think it's important, but it's also... I like to do a little bit of a conservative rant about your individualism. It's our fault that society's arguments have gotten that low because we will still feed into watching them. Mm-hmm. If we moved out and more people responded to long form debate and argument, and more people tuned into those live streams, you would see the spectrum change. But until that does, we'll keep getting what we're getting.
We also have the fact that in the internet age, we have this weird duality. On the one hand, we have more access to information now than we have ever had before. On the other hand, like you said, we segregate ourselves. So the person that watches Fox News only reads Breitbart and Town Hall and Michelle
The Blaze
conversely, liberal will do the same thing. And in both cases now, I just wrote about this the other day. I'm so angry about liberal websites doing the same. They're copying the tactic that right-wing websites have used for years and years and years of just flat-out lying, taking something and just totally distorting what it was.
Yeah.
And exploiting the fact that people only read the headlines most of the time. 60% of the time, studies show that people only read the headlines.
I think it's is it Live Science that's been playing that game with people where they're posting an appealing headline and having the story about people not reading it inside of it. I've seen that a couple times, which is clever. It reminds me, though, about what Justin said earlier on, too, about Newt Gingrich and how people feel. When we have those two towers, isn't it kind of that way, too, where the liberals are speaking to liberals about the feel-good moment of how you respond to the other side, and the same is going on the right, and it's not actually about the factual information being crossed.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what we call debate is really just tossing slogans and platitudes at each other.
There's not an actual debate.
I was going to say this earlier, but this is a good lead into it, that we talk about law and order. Law and order is a dog whistle. You mentioned Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal famously said that the phrase family values is a code phrase that means get the gays.
That's right.
He actually used a different term for that.
Sure.
And he said law and order is and welfare queen are catchphrases that mean get the blacks. And the fact that this reminds us of Nixon and his law and order campaign is not coincidental. Because Lee Atwater helped design the Southern strategy for Richard Nixon, and the law and order thing was a big part of that Southern strategy. Make poor white people afraid of poor black people. and you win their votes.
Yeah, instill the mentality, hey, yeah, it's bad that I'm poor, but at least I'm not a minority type idea, right? That's something that people can see very prevalent in rural society in America today. No questions asked. Stick around. We're going to be covering much more topics. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. It's going to be everything you've ever dreamed of. 616-656-1680. Stick around. We'll be right back.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, live in studio, WPRR 95.3 FM, 1680 AM with Ed Brayton and Justin Schieber. So, yeah, kind of continuing the conversation, we were talking about the towers of information and how they kind of bounce back and forth. And I think it's extremely important to go into the other side. Read Breitbart, read the Federalist. Now, you're not going to like everything you read, trust me. But I think that there are some people, Rod Dreher is one, where that's a guy who is an intellectual person who has very solid arguments. He has some that I think are off the wall. But I tend to like an 80-20 perspective on people where 80% is good, 20% you're never going to agree with 100, or else I kind of question your ideals.
Someone actually messaged me the other day on Facebook and said, can you recommend any serious conservative writers? Ones that really we should take their ideas seriously. They aren't,
And then you said LOL no and sent him a cool meme.
No, I actually mentioned Rod Dreher. Right? I mentioned Rod Dreher, and I said, look, go to the American Conservative. Mm-hmm. That magazine is home to some of the best conservative writers. They are not partisan. They're intellectuals. They're wrong half the time, in my view, but they are serious, and you should take their ideas seriously and engage them seriously.
That's right, and that's Pat Buchanan's...
Yeah, it was actually founded by Pat Buchanan, who I don't take seriously.
Yes, but it's a great point to say that, it's important. I think there's people on the left that I just do not take seriously. No. And there's people on the right, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to generalize that it's all the same, because it's a disproportionate amount of groups. But it still doesn't mean you can't understand the ideals of the other side. Mm-hmm. You know, and I know it is a bit of a platitude at the same time, but it's the reason why we get discourse where people will buy into someone like Donald Trump, because they don't know that there's regular conversation amongst conservatives and liberal people every day.
And for God's sake, liberals, stop sharing stuff from Occupy Democrats, Winning Democrats, Politics USA, If You Only News, USUncut.com.
US Uncut is a bad one.
They're horrible. There's a long list of these. Like I said, these liberal websites that have now taken to doing the exact same thing that right-wing websites like Breitbart have been doing for a long time. Drives me up the wall, because my Facebook feed is just filled with this stuff.
Well, and those memes, this is what we were talking about just last segment, the feel-good memes. When you're posting that meme where it's like the hypocrisy of whatever group is your group against the other, where you say, yeah, I know reps did X, but then Democrats did Y, but that's just feeding your own interest. It does nothing to drive the conversation towards people thinking about those memes or changing their mind.
Well, I don't mind pointing out hypocrisy. I think that's important regardless of which side it is. The problem is it's just so often they just oversimplify everything. Yeah. And sometimes you're just flat out inaccurate. And that's why, I have a couple of things on my blog that I do, stupid atheist memes and stupid liberal memes. And I'm a liberal atheist.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important. Don't act like the other side. Don't do the very thing you've been criticizing all this time. It drives me up the wall. Mm-hmm. And what really bugs me is how much pushback I get on that.
You get the most hair-splitting technical defenses of these memes.
Oh, man.
Well, clearly absurd on their face.
Here's two responses I get all the time. One is, well, they do it, so why can't we?
There it is.
Which, to which my response is, are you 9 years old? Right. Really? But, Mom, they started it.
Yep.
And the second one is, like you said, being really nitpicky. Or
trying to suggest that's what they would mean.
Right. Or it's here's a different claim that's kind of related, and that's kind of accurate, so that makes this totally inaccurate claim okay.
And to me, it plays into, and I know I use sports analogies too much here, but it plays into the idea of like, who are you communicating with, right? A sender and receiver. I'm sending out the meme that's about whatever, a small little claim about the hypocrisy, but is it to change minds, or is it just to get other people that agree with you to like it? We're just searching for likes, like the intent. And when I'm saying a sports analogy, it's like, how many times has a player ran up to a referee and screamed in their face about a call, and the ref was like, "You know what? You're right. You've entirely changed my mind on it. I'm going to flip it."
I know. Justin's such a
I know. Yeah, Justin's such a. This is a great conversation.
He's like, "What's an umpire?"
But in it, we'll dive in. We'll jump right out. But quickly, I think that's the concept too. Is where if you want to get a dialogue going about someone being a hypocrite or not worth voting for or whatever, you're not going to get it in a meme on your wall, right?
Well, no, I mean, I think memes can be accurate. There's no reason they have to be inaccurate, but people do this because of basic tribalism. This supports my side, so I don't really care if it's, remember Stephen Colbert famously invented that phrase, truthiness?
Yeah.
Right? And he aimed it at the right, and they were largely responsible for it. But now I'm seeing the left do the same thing. All right, it's not really true, but it's kind of truthy, and it supports my side, and so that narrative slips into our heads. I mean, we could go on for 3 hours about motivated reasoning and confirmation bias and how our brains really aren't designed to be rational. They're designed to rationalize.
It's funny, they rationalize it. I think that because they have good intentions, that it's okay.
Right.
But they fail to realize that that's exactly the reason the other side is justifying their initial deceptions.
Right. And this is, Justin, this is basically like the hallmark of his work in counter-apologetics. And for me, it touches on so many of the areas that I write about, like, the religion and the Founding Fathers and David Barton and all the fake quotes from the Founding Fathers that circulate among the Christian right. But then I see our side doing the same thing sometimes, and I get angry. And so I think both of us have sort of made part of our whole motivation for this is to say, no, accuracy matters. And whenever I have to say that, like, I can't believe I have to explain this to people who consider themselves supremely rational just because they're atheists.
That's right. And if you get there's the liberal atheism idea of too, where you're so used to having easy arguments and softballs to knock around that when you get seriously challenged, they almost get angry. Almost angry at you.
Absolutely.
Right? Do you guys have any examples of that, or just I'm sure?
Yeah,
I'm kind of looking towards Justin.
How many times have each of us been accused of being Christian apologists?
I know you get that a lot.
I'm routinely, on Twitter especially. Well, that's a particularly egregious form of the complaints we're having right now. But I'm routinely accused of being a Christian. I'm like, all right, man, I'm not even going to correct you sometimes. My
perspective on this is that they're right, but for the wrong reason.
Exactly.
The reason I think that you're a Christian mole is because you so love the God's Not Dead music.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's right. With videos,
that's a legitimately great song. I don't care who disagrees.
And you sang it legitimately well, too. There's a video of that on YouTube.
That's
with
the
you
real reason
Jeremiah
he's a Christian apologist. It has nothing to do with taking the other side's argument seriously.
Yeah. No, and I think that does play into it, where I think we get so used to it being people on the left looking at the right and saying these arguments are so kind of lowball that when you get seriously challenged, it's almost taking offense. For instance, saying that the right is anti-science. Well, a lot of people on the left will hold anti-GMO or anti-vax views and say, well, it's completely different. Information's not out, the same story, right? Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Justin, for joining me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Elder Joe.
Yeah, love it. And thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate your support. You can further support Paleo Radio by donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/PaleoRadio Show. And please don't forget to like Paleo Radio on Facebook and Twitter, and email us questions or comments at PaleoRadioShow@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. We're going to be more on a set schedule from here on out, so we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.